My brother told me I was doing this for myself, right after I begged him to help save my daughter's life. We hated each other growing up, not in the cartoon sibling rivalry way. I mean actual hate, like locking bathroom doors just to piss each other off, telling our mom the other one stole money or broke something or skipped school. And for years it worked. She believed both of us in shifts, but mostly she was just tired and working double shifts and too checked out to care who started what. So we got meaner, sharper. We turned silence into punishment and screaming into a sport. And when our dad was home, which wasn't often, he tried to make peace but didn't really know how. He'd bribe us with food or gifts or threats, depending on the mood. But the second he stepped out, it was war again. And honestly, I don't remember one single good memory with my brother until the day Dad died. And I know that sounds dramatic, but it's just the truth. It's like something snapped in both of us that day. Like we looked at each other for the first time and realized, oh shit, we're the only ones left who actually know what it was like to live in that house. And it wasn't like we hugged and healed and turned into best friends overnight. But something shifted. We stopped fighting. We ate dinner in the same room without knives in our eyes. We started talking. Small stuff first. Who's picking up mom's meds? Did you call the lawyer back? Should we sell dad's car? And it slowly became real conversations. The kind you only have when nobody else gets it but the person who watched it all happen too. And I started to see him not as the asshole who used to read my diary out loud but as someone who'd been just as lost and angry and broken as I was, just in different ways. So when he said he had this idea for a business, something small, nothing flashy, just his own garage to work on bikes and fix junkers, I didn't hesitate. I said, do it. I said, if anyone can, it's you. And he took out a loan. Not huge but big enough to scare him, and he rented a shitty unit off the highway and worked 12-hour days and posted ads online and handed out flyers at gas stations, and the first 2 months looked okay, barely breaking even but still afloat. And I kept checking in and boosting his posts and telling him it was just early days. Everyone struggles at the beginning. But by month 4 he stopped answering texts for days, started snapping when I asked about money. And then in month 6 he finally admitted it. It's done, he said. I can't keep up with the loan. The customers dropped off. I'm closing it down. And I wanted to tell him it was okay, but he looked so gutted, like I just said Dad died all over again. And all I could say was, come home. He moved in with nothing but his backpack and a folded copy of the loan contract he couldn't finish paying. Didn't even look me in the eye when I opened the door. Just walked in slow like someone waiting to be kicked out before he even sat down. And I told him he could take the bed. I'd take the couch for a while. And he didn't argue. Just mumbled, I'll pay you back. And I said, don't worry about it. Because I meant it then. I really did. I wasn't keeping score. I just didn't want him alone. In that headspace, the kind where you start thinking maybe none of this will ever get better. And I watched him for weeks, getting up early, spending hours online, filling out forms, applying to everything from janitor to tech support. And then one day he says, there's this HVAC program. 6 weeks. They say they'll place me after. And I just nodded and said, do it. Didn't even ask the cost. Just paid the deposit when his card got declined. And he didn't say thank you. Not really. Just got real quiet, which for him is the closest thing to gratitude. And he started going every day, full days, studying late, watching YouTube tutorials on top of the classes, taking notes like a man who couldn't afford to fail again. And I swear I didn't mind the mess, the socks under the table, the dishes in the sink, because at least he was moving, at least there was forward motion. And when he passed the exam and got certified, I swear it felt like I'd passed something too, like maybe all that heaviness from the garage failure was finally starting to let up, and he started picking up gigs, small ones at first, helping someone install a window unit, checking a broken thermostat, mostly Craigslist type work. But he showed up, did the job, left things cleaner than he found them, and slowly the calls picked up, and I kept saying, told you you'd get there. But he just grunted, like he couldn't let himself believe it yet. And then one day I'm showing a rental to this guy from Florida. Corporate transfer, asks a million questions about the neighborhood, the parking, the lease, and just before we wrap up he goes, you don't happen to know anyone who installs ACs? These units look ancient, and I didn't even blink, just said, my brother's a tech, licensed, fast, solid, and gave him the number, and that was it. That was the start. The guy called him the same night, job was done next morning, no bullshit, no delays, and he paid well, left a review online without being asked, and within 2 weeks my brother was booking back-to-back installs. People were texting him photos of their systems with, can you fix this? And, how soon can you come? And suddenly, he was waking up early again, buying tools, leaving invoices on the counter with quiet pride, and I watched it build, not overnight but steadily, and I didn't say much because I didn't need to. I was just glad to see him moving with purpose again. And I kept thinking, this is how it should have been the first time. This is who he was always meant to be. But he needed a second shot, and maybe someone to catch him the first time he fell. And I did that, no medals, no speeches, but I did that, and even though he never said it out loud, I knew he knew. Because one night he came home late, covered in attic dust, looked around the apartment, and instead of going to bed he took out the trash, washed the dishes, and left a six-pack in the fridge with a sticky note that just said, "Cold, like you like it," and I didn't say anything the next morning, just nodded when he offered to cook. Because sometimes that's what thank you looks like in our family. Quiet, crooked, but real. He moved out 6 months after the first real client, said it like a joke at first, "I think it's time I get my own fridge," and I laughed because I thought it was a joke, but he was serious, had already found a place, signed a lease, and I drove him there on a Saturday morning with his tools, a mattress, and a second-hand microwave, helped scrub the sink, stocked his fridge, and told myself it was a win. This was the goal, right, to get him out, get him up. But the second I left that apartment, something shifted, like the silence in my place got heavier, and I didn't expect to miss him. But I did, more than I wanted to admit. The dumb background noise of him, the way he'd yell at the TV, the way he'd text, "Grab milk," when I was already at the store, and for a while we stayed close. He'd come by, bring beer, check in, and I liked it. It felt like we were finally in a good place, not codependent, just solid. And around the same time I met someone too. A guy who came into the office to sign a lease, nothing dramatic, just quiet interest and mutual tiredness that turned into dinners and texts and eventually weekends. And I didn't tell my brother right away, partly because it felt new and partly because I didn't want to make it a thing. But when I did, he barely reacted, just said, "Cool," then changed the subject, and I let it slide. Figured he was distracted, busy with work, which he was. He'd officially launched the company, registered the name, built a site, had 2 guys working under him part-time, and people loved him, called him reliable, honest, clean work, no upsell. And I was proud of him, genuinely. But I also started noticing the way his calls got shorter, how he canceled plans more often, how I'd find out about major updates through other people, like he didn't even think to tell me anymore, and it stung in this stupid slow way, like erosion. Like realizing the person you rooted for stopped seeing you as part of the story. And meanwhile things with my guy were going well, stable, no drama, just slow trust, and I started leaning into that more, building something of my own. And I guess part of me thought maybe now my brother would see it, would say something like, "You deserve that," or, "I'm glad you're not always carrying everyone." But he didn't. And when he met the guy he was polite but distant, like he was sizing him up but didn't care enough to say anything. And then not long after that, my brother shows up to a family thing with a girl. New, flashy, pretty in a curated kind of way, introduced her like a product. "This is Rachel. She helps with scheduling." And she smiled like someone who already knew the whole room, and I stood there holding a bowl of pasta salad while she told everyone how he built everything from scratch, and how nobody helped him. It was all grit, and he just nodded like that was true, like I hadn't fed him, housed him, found the first client that lit the whole match, and I don't even know what stung more, her words or his silence, but I didn't say anything, just smiled like the rest of them. And after the party I waited for him to say something, to text, to acknowledge it, but he didn't, and I sat on my bed that night next to someone who cared about me, who showed up, who noticed shit without being told, and I realized I'd been replaced without warning, like a scaffold you pull down after the building stands. And maybe that's how it works, maybe I was supposed to disappear once he was steady, but it still felt like I'd been written out of a story I helped write, and I didn't know if that was more pathetic or just true. By the time we got engaged I already knew things with my brother weren't the same, hadn't been for a while, and I told myself it was just life, people drift, priorities shift, but it still sat in my throat, this low resentment that I kept pushing down every time he forgot to text back or canceled last minute or just never asked how I was really doing. And when we sent out the wedding invites I hesitated before putting his name on the envelope, stared at it for a long time like maybe I should leave it blank, let him reach out first, but in the end I sent it, because I'm not the kind of person who makes a statement by omission, and he RSVP'd late, of course, said he'd be there, said Rachel was coming too, and I told myself it'd be fine, it's just one day, I wouldn't let it get to me, but I should have known better, I should have trusted the nod in my gut, because from the second they walked into the venue I felt it, something was off, she had that look, like she was here out of obligation, all stiff smiles and fake compliments, and he was acting weird too, distant, like he didn't want to be noticed, and I was too busy running on adrenaline and logistics to deal with it right away. but every time I looked over she was talking too loud, laughing at things that weren't funny, holding his arm like a possession, and I kept thinking maybe I was just reading into it too much. Maybe I was anxious. But then during the reception she cornered me by the bathroom, of all places, wine in hand, full face of perfectly set makeup, and said, "You really lucked out, huh? Not everyone marries up," and I stared at her like she was speaking another language, and then she leaned in a little and said, "Must be nice, always knowing how to cash in at the right time," and I froze, not because it hurt, but because it was so damn calculated, so targeted, and I knew exactly what she meant, like I was some manipulative little survivor, climbing her way out through favors and fake generosity, and I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was so absurd, and I said, "Do you have a problem?" And she just smiled and said, "Some of us had to actually work for what we have," and before I could respond, my brother came around the corner, looked at us, looked at me, and said nothing, didn't ask what happened, didn't check on me, just put a hand on her back and said, "We're gonna go," and that was it. No defense, no apology, not even eye contact, just turned his back and walked out with her like none of it mattered, like I was being dramatic or petty for reacting. And I stood there in that hallway next to the goddamn restroom hearing people laughing and clinking glasses and celebrating a day I'd spent months planning. And all I could feel was heat in my face and this slow wave of humiliation, not just because she came at me like that, but because he let her, because he made a choice in that moment to walk away instead of say one fucking word in my defense. And I went back out there and smiled for photos and thanked everyone for coming and danced with my new husband and kept the night moving. But I wasn't really there, I was somewhere else, rewinding every moment with my brother since the shop failed, since I gave him a place to land, since I handed him that first client, and I realized this wasn't about the wedding, it wasn't about Rachel, it was about how easily I could be rewritten in his story, how fast people forget the hand that caught them when they fell. And that night when we got home and my husband said, "That was perfect, babe," I smiled and kissed him and said, "Yeah," but what I felt was something cracked and quiet and permanent, and I didn't even cry. I just lay there staring at the ceiling thinking, they took my day and they didn't even have the decency to know it. 6 months later I'm scrolling through my phone on a Sunday morning, still in bed, half asleep, and I see a picture on my feed that stops my breath cold. It's Rachel, in a white dress, standing next to my brother in a suit I've never seen before, holding hands under some overpriced string lights in a venue that looks like it cost more than his first year of rent, and I blink like I'm hallucinating, check the date, check the tags, check the comments, and it's real. He got married, and I wasn't there, I wasn't even told, and my chest goes hot and then numb like something inside me just tipped sideways and won't settle, and I scroll more, see the same post reshared by 2 of our cousins, one of them even wrote, "Such a beautiful day, so happy for you both," and all I can think is you knew and you didn't say a word, and I sit there with the phone in my hand and my heart punching through my ribs and I tell myself don't overreact, there's gotta be some mistake, maybe it was last minute, maybe it was private, maybe they're doing a bigger thing later. But I already know that's bullshit. I know what a deliberate exclusion feels like. I know the sting of it, and I call him, because I need to hear it, need to know what the fuck this is. And he answers on the 3rd ring with this voice like he's busy or annoyed already, just goes, "Hey, like we talked yesterday," and I say, "You got married," and there's this pause, 2 seconds too long. And then he says, "Yeah, like it's nothing. Like it's not a bomb dropped in the middle of my spine," and I wait, hoping for something. An explanation, an apology, a joke, anything. But he says nothing else, so I go, "You didn't even tell me," and he sighs, deep and heavy, like I'm exhausting, like I'm the problem, and says, "Look, I didn't want drama," and I say, "So you thought just cutting me out completely was cleaner?" And he says, "Rachel didn't want to make it a thing. She thought it'd be better if we just kept it simple," and I laugh, because it's so goddamn absurd I can't help it, and I go, "Are you serious right now? You let her erase me from your wedding?" And he says, "No one erased you," and I say, "You got married and didn't invite me," and he says, "I didn't want it to be weird, okay? After what happened at yours," and I say, "What happened at mine was her throwing shit in my face and you walking away," and he snaps, "You always do this," and I go, "Do what?" And he says, "Make it about you, twist everything like I owe you my whole life," and that one lands, not because it's true but because I know he believes it, and I sit there on the phone with my own brother who I fed, housed, saved, who I held together when he couldn't get off the floor, and he's telling me I'm the problem, I'm the one twisting things, and I say, "You know what? Congratulations. I hope it's everything she wants," and he says, "Don't do that," and I say, "Do what?" "Be disappointed you didn't think I was worth seat at your wedding," and he goes quiet again and then says, "I'm just asking you not to make this harder than it needs to be," and that's it. That's the part that breaks me, because I realize in his mind I'm not family anymore, I'm a complication, an inconvenience, a thread he doesn't want to pull, and I say, you already made it hard the second you decided I wasn't worth being there. And he doesn't answer, just lets the silence sit, and I hang up. First, because if I didn't I would have begged, and I don't beg, not for people who leave me out of the most important day of their lives and still expect me to understand. And the second the call ends I lose it, face in hands, knees to chest, sobbing so hard I can't breathe. Not even sure if I'm mad or heartbroken or just tired. And the worst part is I was going to tell him I'm pregnant. I've known for 2 weeks and hadn't said anything yet. Wanted to say it in person. Wanted it to mean something. Thought maybe that would bring us back even a little. But instead I just sat there shaking and crying, holding my stomach and realizing he'll probably find out from someone else, just like I found out about his wedding. I sent the invite like a fucking idiot. This cute little card with a scratch-off sticker that said, boy or girl, and a photo of the sonogram, addressed it by hand, dropped it in his mailbox myself because I didn't trust the mail, and waited like a kid waits for a letter from summer camp, thinking maybe this was the thing that would break whatever the hell was between us. Maybe a baby was big enough, pure enough, to cut through the static. And he didn't answer, not even a text, not a single word, and I told myself he was busy, distracted, uncomfortable maybe, and I went ahead with the party anyway. Just a small thing in our backyard with balloons and cupcakes and pink and blue everything, and everyone smiled and clapped and cheered when we cut the cake and saw the pink inside, and I smiled too, but part of me kept glancing toward the street, like maybe a car would pull up late and he'd be there with some stupid gift and a shrug like nothing happened. But he never came, and when she was born, my daughter, my whole heart in a 6-pound body, my husband threw a little celebration the weekend after we got home, just close friends, nothing big, just joy. And we sent the invite again, not even formal, just a group text, and still nothing from him, and I stopped pretending I didn't care. I did care, I cared, because that was his niece and I wanted her to know him, wanted her to have family that wasn't broken. And then time passed, fast and slow, and she turned 1 month after that she got sick, not a little sick, not a cough or rash, I mean sick, fever, vomiting, eyes not focusing, and the ER doctors didn't even wait, they rushed her straight in, and it was a congenital issue, something no one caught earlier, and she needed surgery, now, not next week, not tomorrow, now, and insurance was a joke, a maze of denials and small print, and we were short, 16,000 short, and my husband looked at me with that face people make when they don't want to say the obvious, and I said it for him, I'll ask him, and he didn't argue, just nodded, and I called my brother, fully prepared to eat every piece of pride I had left, and he answered this time, said, hey, everything okay? And I almost laughed because it was the first time he'd asked in a year, and I told him everything, what the doctor said, what it would cost, how fast we needed it, and he went quiet, then said, okay, yeah, I'll help, just give me the account details, and I did, sent them, right away, and for a minute I felt like maybe things could shift again, maybe this was the crack in the wall, and then nothing came, no transfer, no update, no message, and I waited, and hours turned into a full day, and the hospital kept asking, and we kept stalling, and I called again, and this time it rang and rang until someone picked up and it wasn't him, it was Rachel, and she didn't even say hello, just said, if this is about money, forget it, and I said, what are you talking about? He said he'd help, and she said, you leeches always say the right thing until it's time to pay up, and I said, it's for my daughter, she's in a hospital bed, she could die, and she said, we're not funding your drama, tell your husband to get a second job, and then she hung up, just like that, and I stood in my kitchen holding the phone like it was burning through my hand and I started sobbing so hard I couldn't make a sound, and my husband came in and didn't even ask, just wrapped his arms around me and said, we'll figure it out, and the next morning we drove to the bank and applied for a second mortgage, put the house up, signed the papers with shaking hands, and paid for the surgery, and she made it, our baby made it, and that's what matters, I know that, but the scar it left in me isn't from the money, it's from knowing I once kept that man alive and he couldn't lift a finger to keep my child breathing. We didn't plan it as revenge, it just happened that way. After the hospital, after the loan, after watching my husband sign papers with shaking hands so we could save our daughter's life, something in us hardened, clicked into place, like all the shit we'd swallowed over the past year had finally turned into steel. My husband got quiet, then focused. He started talking to an old friend from school who did HVAC work upstate, and they started small, just repairs, odd jobs, duct cleaning, stuff that barely covered costs but kept the lights on, and I helped where I could, not even thinking about where it would go. just wanting to be useful, needed, connected to something real. I still had my job at the agency, still met people buying, selling, renting, and it turns out when you've got a baby in your arms and a tired voice but a good recommendation, people trust you. So I started sliding business cards into folders, saying, "My husband's firm does installs. If you need someone reliable," and it worked. Word spread. We started getting steady calls, then repeat customers. Then someone from a big property group called and asked if we could handle multiple units. We weren't ready, but we said yes anyway. That job paid off the entire mortgage and gave us enough to officially start the company. New name, new site, new logo. And suddenly it wasn't just a hustle, it was a company. Ours, built from the same pressure that nearly broke us. This journey took us 4 years, and I started noticing something else. Customers who used to work with my brother were coming to us. Quietly, no drama, just, "He got too expensive," or, "They didn't call back," or, "Your team's just easier." I didn't gloat, I didn't even bring it up at first, but I noticed. And then one day I saw it clear as day. One of his former commercial contracts had been redirected to us. We didn't pitch them. They came to us. I saw the name on the invoice and stared at it for a long time before I filed it. That was the first time I said it out loud. "We're taking his market." My husband nodded, not proud, not smug, just aware. And maybe I should have felt guilty, but I didn't. I felt justified. Because he built his house on silence and ego, and we built ours on grit and survival. It wasn't about beating him. It was about making sure no one could ever leave us that vulnerable again. And then it happened. Rachel left him. Just like that. Divorce papers, cold and official. She took the car, the apartment, half the cash, didn't even pretend to be discreet about it. She moved in with some financial advisor 3 weeks later and posted about finally choosing herself. And the only reason I knew is because a mutual cousin sent me the screenshots. I didn't smile. I didn't call. I just read the words again and again until it sank in. The empire he thought he built was never really his. She used his name, his work, his sweat, until it was no longer useful, and then walked out with the keys. And part of me thought, now you know how it feels. Now you know what it's like to give and be left standing alone. But I didn't reach out. I didn't rub it in. Because I was too busy helping my daughter with her blocks, watching my husband build quotes, answering emails from clients who trusted us, who came back again and again, because we showed up, because we never disappeared, because we remembered where we came from. It had been months since the divorce, and longer since we'd spoken. I didn't expect to see him again. I figured he'd stay gone, the way people do when too much has been said and too little has been owned. And then one evening, quiet, normal, dinner in the oven, my daughter playing near the front door, I heard the knock. Just 2 soft raps, almost like whoever was out there wasn't sure they deserved to be. I wiped my hands, walked halfway there, and stopped when I saw her open the door first. She was 5 now, fierce, talkative, unafraid. And there he was, standing outside like a man who'd been dropped in the wrong version of his own life. She looked up at him and said, "Hi." He blinked, frozen, like he couldn't figure out how to speak. Then he pointed to the scar under her collarbone, just barely visible through her shirt. "What's that?" She said it so casually it broke me. "Surgery. You almost messed it up." I stepped in then, picked her up without a word, held her close. He was still on the porch. He didn't try to come inside. He just stood there and said, "I heard about what happened. I'm sorry, for all of it." I nodded. That was all I gave him. He looked older. Not wrecked, but tired. Like someone who finally ran out of stories to tell himself. "You were right," he said. "She said things I should have stopped. I didn't. I didn't protect you. And I didn't help when you needed it most. I didn't correct him. He was right. All of it." And he stood there waiting, maybe for a breakdown, maybe for some dramatic confrontation. But I wasn't that girl anymore. I was someone who built a business from ashes. I was someone who signed mortgage papers and medical waivers in the same week. I was someone who raised a daughter who could answer a man like him without blinking. So I looked him in the eye and said, "I forgive you." He let out a breath like he'd been holding it for months. But then I added, "That doesn't mean I'm letting you back in." His face shifted, just slightly, like maybe he expected that part but hoped otherwise. "I know," he said. "I just wanted to say it, that I know what I did." And I nodded again. "You do. That's good." And that was it. I closed the door, locked it, turned back to my kitchen, my daughter, my life. Because forgiveness is something I gave for me. But trust, access, family, that's earned. And some bridges don't burn. They just don't get rebuilt. Subscribe, hit the like button, and explore more fascinating stories.